Welcome to the final part of our journey into how Marvel completely transformed Norse mythology. And if you've made it this far, you now know that Thor, Loki, Odin, Heimdall, and Freya bear almost no resemblance to their authentic mythological counterparts. But today, we're going to answer the most important question of all. Why did Marvel make these dramatic changes? And what do those changes reveal about the difference between ancient mythology and modern storytelling? The answer is going to surprise you, because it's not just about making family-friendly entertainment. It's about fundamental differences in how ancient cultures and modern audiences understand morality, power, and what makes someone worth following. By the end of this video, you're going to understand not just what Marvel changed, but why those changes were probably inevitable. Let's start with the most obvious reason for Marvel's transformations. Ancient Norse mythology is absolutely brutal. We're talking about stories filled with graphic violence, sexual content, moral ambiguity, and psychological complexity that would make a rated R movie look like a children's cartoon. The real Norse gods regularly engage in activities that include torture, betrayal, infanticide, and behaviors that modern audiences would find deeply disturbing. But here's what's fascinating. Vikings didn't see these brutal stories as entertainment. They saw them as education. Norse mythology wasn't meant to be escapist fantasy. It was meant to prepare people for the harsh realities of life in a dangerous world. When a Viking child heard about Odin sacrificing his eye for wisdom, they weren't learning about a fun adventure. They were learning that all knowledge comes with a price, and that sometimes the price is worth paying. Modern superhero movies serve a completely different purpose. We don't go to Marvel movies to learn about the harsh realities of existence. We go to see clearly defined heroes triumph over clearly defined villains. We want to leave the theater feeling inspired and hopeful, not contemplating the tragic complexity of existence. Marvel had to transform these complex, morally ambiguous gods into simplified heroes, because that's what modern mythology is supposed to do. This brings us to one of the most significant changes Marvel made. They turned Norse mythology from a tragedy into a triumph. Authentic Norse mythology is fundamentally tragic. It's about gods who know they're doomed, who fight anyway, and who face their destruction with courage and dignity. Ragnarok isn't a battle that can be won. It's an ending that must be faced. The Norse gods don't save the world. They die trying to prevent its destruction, knowing that their efforts are ultimately futile. Marvel couldn't make movies about cosmic futility and inevitable doom, so they transformed Ragnarok from an ending into a new beginning. Thor. Ragnarok isn't about the death of the gods. It's about the liberation of a people and the birth of a new kingdom. Marvel turned the most tragic story in Norse mythology into an uplifting tale of renewal and hope. But here's what we lost in that transformation: the profound Norse understanding that courage isn't about winning. It's about fighting even when you know you're going to lose. The real Norse gods were heroic not because they saved the day, but because they faced impossible odds with dignity and determination. That's a much more sophisticated understanding of heroism than anything we see in modern superhero movies. Let's talk about the most dramatic character transformation of all: how Marvel changed Loki from a cosmic force of necessary chaos into a misunderstood villain seeking approval. This change reveals something fundamental about how differently ancient and modern cultures understand the role of disruption in society. In Norse mythology, Loki wasn't evil. He was essential. He represented the force that prevents systems from becoming too rigid and stagnant. His tricks and schemes forced other gods to adapt, grow, and become stronger. Vikings understood that chaos and order weren't opposites. They were partners in the cosmic dance that kept the universe functioning. Modern storytelling doesn't have room for this kind of complexity. We need clear heroes and villains, and we need villains who can be redeemed or defeated. Marvel turned Loki into a character seeking his father's love because that's a motivation modern audiences can understand and sympathize with. But in doing so, they lost the profound insight that some forces exist not to be defeated, but to be balanced. The same pattern appears in Marvel's treatment of Odin. The authentic Odin was a character study in the corruption that comes with absolute power and the terrible choices that wisdom sometimes requires. He showed Vikings that even the wisest ruler makes morally questionable decisions, and that the pursuit of knowledge inevitably leads to moral compromise. Marvel turned Odin into a flawed but ultimately loving father figure because modern audiences need authority figures they can ultimately trust and admire. We don't want movies about the corruption of power. We want movies about leaders who make mistakes but learn from them and ultimately do the right thing. Marvel's Odin learns to be a better father. The mythological Odin was a warning about what happens when the pursuit of wisdom becomes an obsession. But perhaps the most revealing change Marvel made was their complete erasure of Freya. And I think I finally understand why they did it. Freya represented a form of power that doesn't fit into modern superhero narratives. She was simultaneously nurturing and deadly, beautiful and terrifying, wise and passionate. She embodied the ancient understanding that creation and destruction are the same force expressed differently. Modern superhero stories need powers that can be clearly categorized and understood. Thor shoots lightning, Hulk smashes things, Iron Man builds technology. But Freya's power was existential. She was the force that made life worth living and the force that made death meaningful. That's not something you can represent with special effects or action sequences. Marvel also had to deal with the fact that authentic Norse mythology is fundamentally polytheistic in a way that modern audiences struggle with. We're used to stories with clear hierarchies and ultimate authorities. But the real Norse pantheon was a complex web of competing interests, shifting alliances, and shared power. Freya wasn't subordinate to Odin. She was his equal in different domains. Heimdall wasn't just a guardian. He was a cosmic force with his own agenda and priorities. Superhero movies need clear command structures and defined roles. They can't handle the political complexity of a pantheon, where power is distributed among multiple competing authorities, each with their own goals and methods. Marvel simplified this into a royal family with a clear patriarch and defined succession, but in doing so they lost the rich political drama that made Norse mythology so sophisticated. Here's something else Marvel couldn't handle. The Norse understanding of gender and sexuality was far more fluid and complex than anything modern blockbuster movies are prepared to explore. Loki's gender shifting, Odin's multiple relationships, Freya's sexual autonomy. These aspects of Norse mythology reflect a culture with a much more nuanced understanding of identity and desire than what typically appears in superhero movies. Marvel needed characters that could be easily marketed to global audiences with different cultural values and standards. They couldn't make a movie about Loki giving birth to monsters or Freya's complex relationships with both gods and mortals. They needed simplified characters that could be understood across cultural boundaries. But here's what I find most interesting about Marvel's changes. They reveal how much our understanding of heroism has changed over the centuries. Ancient Norse heroes were characters who faced inevitable doom with courage and dignity. Modern heroes are characters who overcome obstacles through determination and moral righteousness. Norse mythology prepared people for a world where bad things happen to good people, where doing the right thing doesn't guarantee success, and where wisdom comes through suffering. Marvel movies prepare people for a world where heroes win, villains lose, and justice ultimately prevails. Neither approach is inherently better than the other, but they serve completely different purposes. Norse mythology was designed to help people cope with an unpredictable and dangerous world. Marvel movies are designed to provide hope and inspiration in a world where we want to believe that good will triumph over evil. This brings us to the most profound question raised by this entire comparison. What do we lose when we simplify complex mythological characters into straightforward heroes and villains? We lose the psychological complexity, the moral sophistication, and the existential depth that made these stories powerful enough to survive for over 1,000 years. But we also gain accessibility, inspiration, and the kind of hope that helps people believe in their own ability to make positive changes in the world. Marvel's versions of these characters have inspired millions of people and created a shared cultural mythology that brings people together across global boundaries. So here's my final thought as we wrap up this series. Both versions of these characters serve important purposes. The authentic Norse gods show us how ancient people grappled with complexity, tragedy, and the harsh realities of existence. Marvel's versions show us how modern people create meaning, hope, and inspiration in an uncertain world. Understanding both versions makes us more complete human beings. We need the Norse understanding that life is complex and sometimes tragic, and we need the Marvel understanding that heroes can rise to meet any challenge. We need Loki, the cosmic force of necessary chaos, and we need Loki, the misunderstood brother seeking redemption. What we shouldn't do is mistake one for the other. Marvel's Thor is a great superhero, but he's not the god that Vikings worshipped. The mythological Odin is a fascinating study in power and wisdom, but he's not the kind of father figure we want to see in family entertainment. Both traditions have something valuable to teach us, and understanding the differences between them gives us insight into both ancient wisdom and modern needs. That's the real treasure hidden in these stories, not just entertainment, but understanding of who we are, where we came from, and what we need from our myths. If this series has inspired you to learn more about authentic Norse mythology, I've put together a reading list and resource guide that'll help you dive deeper into these incredible stories. And if you want to see more content comparing mythological sources to their modern adaptations, let me know in the comments what mythology you'd like me to tackle next. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the real stories behind your favorite Marvel characters. The truth, as always, is far more fascinating than fiction.